Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Site for Wight, welcoming you to this week's Talking News on Saturday, the 25th of February 2022. This week I did manage to get a few days away and enjoy the sunshine with 25 degrees of heat. It really was a very nice change from the storms that we've all been experiencing. This week we have also finalised and packed up the newsletter, which is due to go out on Monday. With the newsletter, we've also included a separate insert of several second-hand items we've got for sale. We're very lucky that many items are donated to us at the charity and we're able to sell them on at a fraction of the price that they would cost to buy new. So if any of them are of interest to you, don't hesitate to give the office a call and we'll be able to arrange a time when you can come and try them for yourself. With all COVID restrictions now lifted, please everybody still stay safe. Thank you. Lisa, CEO, Site for Wight.
CLA slams scrapping deadline to register forgotten footpaths, from Island Echo, read by Lee. The Country Land and Business Association, CLA, has slammed the government for removing the cut-off date for adding historic, unrecorded rights of way to the definitive map. The map is intended to record all historic rights of way, and members of the public have been long able to apply to update it where they have evidence. There have been more than 70 years to get the definitive map up to date, and 22 years since the provision for a cut-off was set out in the Countryside and Rights of Way Act. The Act set out how all updates to the map should be completed by 2026, providing certainty to farmers and landowners who may have had lost rights of way on their land. Yet the government this week decided to remove this cut-off date without consultation, much to the confusion and anger of industry bodies. CLA President Mark Tufnell said, "We have engaged constructively and collaboratively on this issue since the turn of the century. For the government to rip up long-established processes without warning, let alone consultation, is extraordinary and deeply damaging. Those seeking to recover long-lost public rights of way have had decades to apply to modify the map, and we have supported their right to do so. But the cut-off date was there for good reason, not least to help provide certainty to farmers and landowners who may wish to buy or sell land, or those who simply need to know that what their responsibilities are. I could perhaps understand the change if our countryside was already lacking in public access, but there are over 140,000 miles of public footpaths in England and Wales alone. That's enough to go around the earth 6 times. We strongly encourage ministers to rethink this move, to re-engage with us and to restore trust in what we always thought was a worthwhile process."
This is Patrina reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Controversial Isle of Wight council tax hike as budget approved. A council tax hike of nearly 3% has been approved on Wednesday. In a shock move, however, it was not the ruling Alliance administration budget that had passed, but instead an amended version by the opposition Conservative Party. It is seen the Isle of Wight Council built 45 million of affordable housing, the creation of a council-owned housing company, and a fee to live stream funerals online. The leading alliance group says it is turning the ship around from managing decline, moving away from cuts. Councillor Laura P.C. Wilcox, leader of the council, said, "We continue to live in the shadow of a pandemic and great uncertainty at home and abroad, and with only a modest 1 million from government recognising the uniqueness of the island, the council must reinforce its vibrant and resilient island economy to secure a better future for all residents." She said it was, in essence, a one-year budget due to the uncertainty in the world, but it committed significantly to regeneration and protected and upheld the front line of adult social services and overcome challenges in poverty, homelessness and education. Following calls from Brinstead councillor Ian Daw, £170,000 was also committed to prioritising flood mitigation works in the area after flooding devastated families in July last year. The Isle of Wight Council is also making £3 million worth of cuts, savings and income generation schemes as part of a financial strategy. Through the schemes, islanders will see a 13% increase in Wight care costs and £30,000 made by charging those families who would like to live stream funerals to those who cannot attend in person. An alternative budget has been proposed by the opposition Conservative group, which called for £40 million to be spent building affordable housing due to the crisis the island currently faces. They also proposed redundancies in the contact centre were scrapped and £500,000 for planting trees and hedges on council land unsuitable for housing. Councillor Joe Robertson, leader of the Conservatives at County Hall, said they believe the budget could be more ambitious and go further in a number of areas: housing, planning and staffing. He said, "There's nothing wrong with being aspirational. Here is the opportunity to work together. Let's do it now." Councillor P.C. Wilcox did not accept the Conservative amendment, but once put to the vote, Chair of the Council, Councillor Jeff Brodie, was able to push it through with a casting vote. When it went to the vote, 34 councillors were in favour of the Conservative amended version, including Councillor P.C. Wilcox, with only 5 against. A 2.99% increase in council tax, 1% which will go directly towards adult social care, would equate to an extra 86p a week for a Band C taxpayer on the island.
This is Michael reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Dougal brings joy and comfort to pupils at St Catherine's. St Catherine's School in Ventnor has welcomed a new therapy dog from Isle of Wight charity Ability Dogs for Young People. Dougal, an Australian Labradoodle, has been trained by the charity for 2 years and now provides support to pupils at the Specialist Speech and Language School. The puppy was sponsored by Highland Roads, which raised more than £2,700 in 2018 through staff fundraising events, which covered the cost of purchasing him as a puppy and also contributed towards his training. Dougal is embarking on his new role at a time when children and young people are particularly in need of extra support due to the negative impact of the pandemic on their mental health. Under the supervision of his handler, Abby Steele, Dougal's role as a school therapy dog includes going into lessons and supporting with one-to-one occupational therapy sessions with students. Sarah Thompson, principal at St Catherine's School, said Dougal has become an important member of our school community. Overall, his role had a huge impact on the well-being of the students and staff at St Catherine's, and they enjoy his company and learning all about him. Carol Court of Ability Dogs for Young People added, "Training school therapy Ability Dogs is an important part of the charity's work. The number of schools involved with this scheme has multiplied since 2020, and we are very proud that Dougal fits the bill." Cookie and Daisy are also Ability Dog School therapy dogs, helping pupils and staff at St Thomas's of Canterbury and Love Lane primary schools. It is heartwarming to see how they are improving lives of everyone at the schools love them.
This is Chris reading an article from the Island Echo. St Mary's won't be removing COVID restrictions, confirms Trust. COVID-19 measures such as face masks and testing at St Mary's Hospital and across the Isle of Wight NHS Trust are to remain in place, it has been confirmed. The government announced earlier this week that England will remove all remaining domestic COVID-19 restrictions from Thursday the 24th of February. This will include the requirement to self-isolate. Those suspected of having COVID are being urged to stay at home, although that guidance is expected to be dropped from the 1st of April. Despite the changes and an effort to return life to normal, the infection prevention and control measures for healthcare settings, including St Mary's Hospital and its community-based locations, remain in place. Patients and visitors at St Mary's are still being expected to wear face masks and take a lateral flow test within 24 hours prior to visiting the hospital. Patients on certain wards that have been in hospital for over 7 days will continue to be permitted just one designated visitor for 1 hour a day. There has been no mention from the Trust as to whether the security guards, or stewards as they prefer to be known, will remain on the entrance doors. Juliet Pearce, Director of Nursing, Midwifery and AHPs, has said, "It is important to remember that in order to protect vulnerable patients, there is separate guidance for healthcare settings to ensure those most at risk are protected from COVID-19. The NHS has important measures in place to protect those in its care, such as our staff carrying out regular testing and face masks being required, and these remain in place from Thursday. As COVID-19 restrictions change, we would like to thank everyone who has followed the guidance and come forward for their vaccinations. Those actions have made a positive difference to our community. It's unclear when or if things will return to normal at St Mary's, although another change in guidance from the 1st of April may prompt restrictions to finally be lifted after more than 2 years.
I've never heard music that loud, and I've been to Ibiza. Neighbours oppose a late-night licence for the Harbour House from the Island Echo, read by Lee. An application to extend the opening hours of the Harbour House restaurant on Ryde Esplanade has met with vehement opposition from concerned neighbours. Currently, the venue closes at 2300 hours. However, the owners of the Harbour House are seeking to extend the licence for serving alcohol to 1 a.m. in the morning and to play recorded music until 1:30 a.m. On the 31st of July last year, the Harbour House was granted a temporary licence for late opening, which neighbours claim caused considerable noise disturbance. When a nearby resident asked the restaurant to turn the music down, they apparently received the reply that the Harbour House had a licence and therefore there was absolutely nothing they could do to stop them. Sarah Medley, who lives opposite Harbour House, says, "Last summer they had a temporary late licence. I live around 500 metres away, and my windows were visibly shaking as the volume of the music was so loud. The glass and rubbish in the surrounding area the following morning was hazardous to local animals and children, as they hadn't cleaned up after their customers. Clearly, this trial run proved that they are not responsible to have a late licence. They lack respect for their neighbours, playing their music ridiculously loud when they are open, and they continually leave rubbish outside the place, which ends up in the sea, or broken glass gets strewn across the public footpath outside. We've witnessed them sweeping cigarette butts into the sea, dumping food waste into the sea, and they don't even seem to have a hygiene rating. One day I picked up over 100 plastic cups out of Ryde Harbour that were disregarded by their customers. Another resident claims large groups of rowdy youths regularly gather to drink there. Piles of rubbish from this business gather on the esplanade, along with plastic cups blowing around and floating in the harbour. This is unacceptable in a family area. It would seem that the owners of this establishment are not able to operate their business in a professional and courteous manner." One more neighbour says, Having been an early morning dog walker along the front, I have noticed that empty glasses and bottles are left overnight, resulting in broken glass across the promenade. If the operators find it difficult to clear up after a 2300-hour finish, I expect it could be even worse if it allowed to run through to 1:30 a.m. The owner of Harbour House, Cole Harding, has hit back at the objections to his application for an extension of licensing hours. He has told the Island Echo, "The Harbour House enhances the local area, creates jobs and attracts tourists. We employ 10 people in our peak period, plus part-time staff. Ryde is a tourist town which lives from tourism. We give tourists and local people what they want. You would expect things to be busy in the middle of summer. Much of the rest of Ryde is derelict. Look at the ice rink and the empty properties on George Street. Our restaurant is not in a residential area. The nearest properties on the Strand are 150 metres away. I would compare our location with those in Union Street, which have late licences and people living in the flats above. We are a classy venue. Our customers are in the age range of 18 to 80. I've never had a complaint drawn to my attention, and my door staff tell me we are the easiest venue to work at in Ryde. Local residents have until the 1st of March to object to the proposed extension to Harbour House opening hours. The Council Licensing Committee will meet to consider the application on the following day. Anyone wishing to comment to the Council on the extension of licensing hours for Harbour House may do so.
This is Prutrina reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. 4th coronavirus jab to be rolled out for most vulnerable. Vulnerable people and those aged 75 and over will be offered a 4th COVID jab this spring, says Health Secretary Sanj Javid. It comes after a recommendation from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, JCVI. Immunity from vaccination declines over time, and many older adults received their most recent vaccine dose in September or October 2021. These individuals face a much higher risk from severe COVID-19, the JCVI said. Therefore, another booster will be recommended for more than 7 million people this spring. Of these, 500,000 immunosuppressed people are eligible. Those advised to get a 4th jab in the spring are adults aged 75 years and over, residents in a care home for older adults, individuals aged 12 years and over who are immunosuppressed, as defined in the COVID-19 Healthcare Guidance Green Book. The JCVI will keep under review whether the booster programme should be extended to further at-risk groups, Mr. Javid said. Pupils aged 18 will be given the Moderna or Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, and eligible persons aged between 12 and 17 will be given the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. The UK already has enough vaccine doses ordered to cover the booster programme. The JCVI has provided additional interim advice to ministers ahead of planning for a wider booster programme in the autumn, which is likely to include people who are at a higher risk or severe COVID-19. No details on this have emerged yet, but the JCVI believes winter is likely to remain the season when the threat of COVID is the greatest. Professor Wee Shin Lim, chairman of COVID-19 vaccination on the JCVI, said, "Last year's booster vaccination programme has so far provided excellent protection against severe COVID-19. To maintain high levels of protection for the most vulnerable individuals in the population, an extra spring dose of vaccine is advised ahead of an expected autumn booster programme later this year." The JCVI will continue its rolling review of the vaccination programme and the epidemiology situation, particularly in relation to the timing and value of doses for less vulnerable older adults and those in clinical risk groups ahead of autumn 2022.
This is Michael reading from Ireland Echo. Stealth change as Council keeps tip booking system despite COVID restrictions being lifted. The Isle of Wight Council has confirmed it won't be removing the booking system from Limbotton or Afton Marsh tips this week, despite the Prime Minister lifting all domestic restrictions and encouraging a return to life as normal. When household waste and recycling centres reopen after lockdown in May 2020, the local authority introduced a number of restrictions, including a strict booking system. It meant that islanders had to pre-book their visits to the tip in order to keep social distancing. Social distancing requirements were lifted in July 2021, but the council kept the booking system in place. However, since then all bays have been reopened and the number of visits per week has increased. Now, as the country moves out of the pandemic and all remaining legal restrictions are lifted, the council has run out of COVID-related reasons for restricting visitors. It's now saying that the booking system will remain because it doesn't legally have to be removed and it has improved the traffic situation. The use of booking system effectively reduces the ease of accessing the tip, which in turn reduces the amount of waste being dumped. Many islanders have drawn a comparison with a recent rise in illegal fly tipping. In years gone by, Limbottom was open from early in the morning until dusk with no restrictions. In 2022, the site is only open between 10 o'clock and 1800 and must be booked 24 hours in advance, with an exact vehicle registration given. The council says that the number of bookings available every day are equal to the full capacity of the site in terms of visitors per hour, but say that the respective days are rarely fully booked. A spokesperson has told Ireland Echo, "The council has received many compliments on the booking system, including from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary Road Traffic Enforcement Advisor, who has written to the council praising the reduction of traffic issues on Bridlesford Road and noting there have been no adverse reports to the police regarding the Afton Marsh site since the introduction of the booking system. There is no legal reason not to maintain the booking system, as many other local councils have, and the Isle of Wight will review this in due course and make a further decision based on the factors mentioned above."
This is Chris reading an article from the Island Echo. Plans submitted for a £110 million redevelopment of Norris Castle estate. After years of setbacks, plans to restore the dilapidated Norris Castle have finally been submitted to the Isle of Wight Council, but it will take 5 years to complete at a cost of £110 million. The castle has been empty since it was bought by its current owners for £4.7 million in September 2015. It is said to be in a precarious condition due to neglect because of the lack of sufficient funds available to previous owners to keep up with its extreme expenses. Now, plans to turn the estate into a year-round heritage and natural environment-led destination resort have been unveiled by the Norris Castle Estate Group, NECG. In a staggering 184 planning documents, agents lay out the development's purpose, which is primarily to conserve the significance of its 3 times Grade 1 and 8 times Grade 2 listed assets. It is estimated the current repairs to the estate would be over £16 million, with added conversion costs of over £90 million. A market value estimation of the completed resort is over £96 million, leaving an £11 million deficit, which NCEG will look to make up elsewhere. Some changes have been made to proposals since they last came forward, with the castle's glass-roofed restaurant removed and further hotel accommodation added separate to the main building. The plans include the conversion of the castle into a 17-suite hotel with a bistro, bar and restaurant, a connected terrace and crescent buildings built into the landscape, providing 57 additional suites, spa treatment rooms and a swimming pool. The restoration and conversions of the building in the farmyard into a farmstead spa and wellness centre with treatment rooms, a gym and library. Restore the Grade 2 pump house into a clubhouse. Repair the bathing house, constructing a new single-storey 80-cover restaurant. 55 resort residences in seafront buildings, coastal cottages and lodges across the estate. Restoration of the seawall, park and gardens and a new slipway and boathouse. And to make the development viable, proposals include housing beyond the Norris Castle estate boundary on the land owned by the NECG, next door at the Spring Hill estate. An estimated 120 dwellings are proposed, a maximum of 105 on 4 parcels of land at Spring Hill, which include 55 units in a senior living scheme. As part of a legal agreement with the council, should plans be approved, islanders would be prioritised for buying homes in the first 3 months, and the resort residences would also not be allowed to be primary accommodation. It is estimated if the plans get approval, it would take 5 years to build, but at the end of it, nearly 160 full and part-time jobs would be created. To view the plans and photos and other documents, you can visit the Council's planning register. Comments on the application can be submitted until the 8th of April.
Isle of Wight Council leader explains the need to now carry a personal alarm from On the Wight, read by Lee. At Thursday night's Isle of Wight full council meeting, the leader, Councillor Laura P.C. Wilcox, explained that she now carried a personal alarm, concerned for her own well-being and the well-being of her family. The personal alarm was given to her following a visit to the Isle of Wight Police today, Wednesday. She said, "It's reassurance, no one should have to be in this position, but I know there are members across the chamber that have also been in this position." Councillor Michael Lilly, Alliance, asked the council leader what lived experience she'd had as a female leader standing up against male violence. Councillor P.C. Wilcox explained that she'd received the personal alarm today and now has to carry it everywhere with her. She added, "I've seen what alcohol has done in relation to violence. When I ran my business, I had women come to me to explain about date rape. It took a lot for those girls to speak to me, so I do understand where it comes from." She added that funding is being directed to Newport and Ryde for preventative work in relation to violence against women and girls. Councillor Julie Jones-Evans, Alliance, told the leader that she stood shoulder to shoulder with her on the issue, adding, "It's a very serious matter that I've had to deal with. There's always an open door." During public question time, Cameron Palin, an East Cowes Town Councillor and rep for the Isle of Wight Association of Local Council, expressed his support for the leader. A round of applause was heard when he said he threw his support behind the leader.
This is Patrina reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Newport subway hit with 2-star food rating. Dirty knives, untrained staff, and food stored above recommended temperature are some of the hygiene issues uncovered at an Isle of Wight subway store. Following an inspection by Isle of Wight Council environmental health officers, the Newport branch of the sandwich store has been handed a 2 out of 5 food hygiene rating, meaning improvement necessary. The store on Town Lane was found to have an unsatisfactory level of hygiene, with inspectors requesting it be thoroughly cleaned. In their report, officers noted the coffee machine was dirty and had obviously not been cleaned for a considerable amount of time. The tomato slicer had various types of food debris on it. The bread spray bottle was dirty and covered in mould. Multiple chopping boards were badly scored and unable to be maintained in a clean condition. Hand contact surfaces throughout the premises were dirty. Food debris was found behind and under equipment. The sealant behind the wash-up sink was mouldy. The temperature probe was not being sanitized before or after each measurement and could lead to cross-contamination. Inspectors were told that the bread-cutting knives should be changed every 20 minutes, but during the inspection they had not been and were dirty with old food debris. Another problem inspectors highlighted was a lack of hygienic hand-drying materials at the wash hand basin, and advised alcohol-based sanitizer could not replace hand washing. The wash hand basin in the food preparation area had a bag of frozen chicken defrosting in it. Officers had noted at previous inspections issues with food being stored at unsuitable temperatures and found it again at their latest visit. Turkey, a high-risk food that should not be stored above 8 degrees centigrade, was stored at 9.6 degrees centigrade, and the salsa sauce was also probed out of temperature. All food that had been identified out of temperature was disposed of voluntarily during the visit. During the inspection, there was no manager or supervisor present, and officers said it was clear that staff had not been provided with instruction in food hygiene policies and practices in relation to hazard analysis. Inspectors also found there was not a suitable hazard analysis in place, but were told after the visit that it was being rectified. Subway has been contacted for comment.
This is Michael reading an article from Island Echo. We haven't felt listened to. Governors slam council over Chillerton and Rookley school decision. The chair of governors of a primary school has slammed the Isle of Wight Council for deferring the final decision on its future once again. In a letter sent to Councillor Debbie Andre, the councillor's education lead Diane Barker, on behalf of the Stenbury Federation, has criticised the council's handling of the future of Chillerton and Rookley Primary School. After listening to concerns from campaigners and the council's scrutiny committee, Councillor Andre deferred the school closure last week. She is to speak to the Island Free School about forming a partnership. Now, Miss Barker has questioned a lack of communication with the council, saying the governors felt ignored. She said, "You claim to be a listening administration. We haven't felt listened to at any point." She said they had high expectations of councillors taking decisions fairly, openly and transparently. So it was with disappointment and frustration they learnt the decision was discussed with the Save Our School campaign before it was made, but not Stenbury governors. Ms Barker also said at no point had the Alliance administration refuted any of the misinformation, slurs or claims made by the campaign, which had a damaging effect on all involved. She said the authority had not listened to the majority of voices in the community who had responded to the consultation, which showed 32% preferred to close the school and send pupils to school in Godshill. Ms Barker said council decision making appears to be currently influenced by false rhetoric and not driven by hard evidence, however difficult and unpopular these decisions may have to be. The governors have called for the decision to be explained to them, to be told what the school's way forward will be and what the council's revised timetable looks like. They also demanding to know why the island's free school had a meeting to discuss the new governing board, but the council chose not to communicate with the current one. The letter was also sent to Councillor Andre in an email from opposition Conservative group leader Councillor Joe Robertson, copying in all council members. In the email, Councillor Robertson said it was in the interests of everyone concerned that Councillor Andre show accountability and leadership. He said, "Your handling of this situation is making the council look ridiculous, while children and families are suffering from the ongoing uncertainty you have created."
This is Chris reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Island Roads asking for opinions as survey deadline approaches. There is still time for islanders to have their say on services provided by Island Roads. Views are being sought via the company's annual customer survey, which encourages residents to rate the different services provided by Island Roads, including road and footway resurfacing, winter maintenance, street cleansing, verge and grass cutting, and customer service. Launched at the beginning of the month and lasting until February the 28th, the survey can be completed online, while paper copies can also be requested if preferred. Island Roads business manager Steve Ambrose said, "There has been a good response so far, which is great. The more feedback, the more able we are to gain a picture of what we are doing well and where we need to improve." The last year has been busy for Island Roads. A further 9.21 kilometres of road improvement schemes were completed, including the delivery of a major junction improvement scheme at St George's Way, alongside a comprehensive programme of surveys and inspections of highway retaining walls across the island. Major schemes at Smallbrook Junction and the shared use path at Fairlea have also been launched, while the final phase of major work to upgrade crossings and signals at Coppins Bridge is also nearing completion. Paper copies of the survey are also available on request by emailing info@islandroads.com or by calling 822 440.
2-foot metal pole seized following attempted burglary in Binstead from the Island Echo read by Lee. Police are working to identify an individual who attempted to break into a family home in Binstead on Tuesday. An incident that is being linked to a series of burglaries on the island in recent weeks. Officers have been conducting inquiries into the alarming incident, which is said to have occurred on the Mall sometime between 1000 hours and 1330 hours on Tuesday morning. Thankfully, no entry was gained and nothing was taken, but police have revealed a 2-foot metal pole was left at the scene. It's thought that the pole which has now been seized, was used by the suspect in an attempt to gain entry. Fingerprint analysis is underway. The Island Echo understands the pole was placed through a window in an attempt to turn the door handle on the inside, but the efforts were hindered as the door was locked. Hampshire Constabulary say they are linking this attempted burglary with a series of burglaries in the Newport and Ryde areas, as previously reported by the Island Echo. A spokesperson for Hampshire Constabulary has said, "We want to take this opportunity to encourage residents to do what they can to keep their properties secure. For full details on the ways in which you can strengthen the security of your property, visit our website at hampshire.police.uk/cp/crime-prevention. Anyone who was in the area at the time and may have seen the incident or may have seen someone carrying a 2-foot metal pole in the vicinity is asked to call police on 101, quoting crime number 442200074030. Similarly, anyone who may have CCTV, dashcam or doorbell footage should contact officers."
This is Chris, reading an article from On the Wight. New glamping treehouse units will enrich Isle of Wight tourism offer, say plans. The 5 treehouse units will be nestled into the landscape, say the plans, enriching the quality of the tourism offer on the Isle of Wight. An application for a proposed glamping site with 5 units of holiday accommodation at New Barn Farm in Calbourne has received support from the local parish council. Plans explain the treehouse units will vary in size, accommodating 2 and 3 bedrooms, and will follow a striking and exciting architectural theme, which uses simple and elegant and crisp materials. Pre-application advice from the council stated the development should be of a high-quality design and protect current visual amenity. It appears that the existing site is well screened from the highway. An arboricultural impact assessment, AIA, followed, which concluded that the proposal will have a low impact on amenity due to tree loss. Low-level bat activity was identified in the area, but there are plans to mitigate for this with the inclusion of bat boxes. Speaking on behalf of the parish council, the clerk explains, "The council discussed this application and had no objection to its subject to any new planting had to take place prior to the units being occupied. The units have to comply with the dark skies policy. The main concern raised was occupation of the units during a shoot." The clerk went on to explain that although the council considers there will be negligible increase in traffic, they do draw to the planner's attention that the council recommends that this stretch of road speed limit is reduced to 40 miles per hour. The public consultation runs from 18th of March and residents can view the plans and have their say via the council's planning portal.
Morning, this is Francis.
And this is Stephen, and we'll be reading the second part of the County Press for you this week. But before we start that, here is this week's society news. The swimming group is back on Monday at its normal time of 1:30pm until 2:30pm at Medina Leisure Centre. For more information on that, please call the office.
God's Hill Coffee Morning is next Tuesday, the 1st of March at 10:30am at the Old Smithy Coffee Shop, God's Hill. Our wonderful volunteers, Linda and Yvonne, would love to see more members for chat and laughter. Pop along, everyone welcome.
Coffee and Chat is on every Wednesday at Millbrook House from 10am to 11:30am, and that's only £1 for cake and coffee. Please come along for a chat, and members of staff will be there for any assistance with equipment and information.
Our Mix and Mingle group is held every Thursday at Millbrook House. Transport is available if required. The group meet between 10:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. for various activities. Please call the office for more details.
And our next golf session at Westridge Golf Centre in Ryde is on Sunday 27th of February. If you'd like to go along and try, please contact the office for more information. The group have several vacancies and always welcome new members.
Lunch Club is on March the 8th at the 8 Bells, Carisbrooke at 12:30 p.m. If you would like to join members and volunteers for a sociable, relaxed lunch, please book a place by Friday the 4th of March by calling the office.
And our monthly book group is held once a month at Millbrook House. We're always looking for new members to join, so if you enjoy reading, please call the office for more information. The group is free to join, and the book can be in either CD or memory stick form. The next date the group meets is March the 9th, and that's at 2 p.m.
This week, the February newsletter will be sent out to you with lots of new exciting activities and opportunities. Please let Susan know in the office if you would like to join with any of the plans. As many of you are aware, the Talking News last week was disrupted by Storm Eunice, but we would like to say a massive thank you to our gallant volunteer Pauline, who braved the storm to arrive at Millbrook to read the news, but also Terry, who despite the terrible weather conditions, made sure the Talking News was recorded and the USB sticks sent out slightly delayed on Monday. What would we do without our amazing volunteers?
And now we move on to the letters and features section of the County Press, starting with a letter from Celia Vosper of Freshwater, headlined, "Heroic lifeboat crews deserve our thanks." Heartfelt thanks to the crews of the Yarmouth and Bembridge lifeboats for turning out in force 8 to 9 gales on Sunday evening during Storm Franklin, after a call regarding a vessel possibly in trouble around the southern tip of the island. They are fantastic and always ready to help, whatever the weather or time of day. Our heroes and often forgotten saviours, well done to you all.
Letter from Matt Weaver of Cowes. Questionnaire is a bizarre way to enforce COVID regulations. I wonder how many people who have been prosecuted for breaking COVID-19 regulations were invited by the police to fill in a questionnaire. Has anyone seen the questionnaire sent to Downing Street staff? What does it ask? Would you like to fess up to boozy parties and be fined? Where's the to and fro of any investigative questioning? Or is this questionnaire simply a piece of Metropolitan Police theatre, dreamt up by a police force led by a commissioner who has always appeared very reticent about challenging and holding to account certain sections of society? In future, when I am pulled over by the police for a minor traffic transgression, I will simply ask them to send me a questionnaire with a week's grace so I can dream up an imaginative excuse.
And now a letter from Melvin Hurst of Ventnor, headlined, "Memories of Singapore Hovercraft 40 years ago." Your article on the old hovercraft being delivered to Singapore in the County Press of the 18th of the 2nd reminded me of my time there in the 1980s, when I was teaching engineering at a local technical university. It was a sandwich course with students spending 6 months on industrial placement, and I was allotted a student to visit regularly on Pulau Bukom, one of the closest inshore islands, where Shell had set up its first refinery in 1900, so it was proclaimed proudly on a storage tank. To get there, the company provided a short hovercraft service for all staff and visitors. It was only a journey of about 5 kilometres, but the technology was new enough to inspire wonder that it worked at all, even though, as an engineer, I understood exactly the principles on which it operated. Little did I know that 40 years later, I would come to live in the only place left where a commercial hovercraft service still operates. That wonder returns every time I cross over to Southsea. Long may the remaining craft continue to do so.
A letter from Alan Sargent of Ryde. Let he who is without sin. I am indebted to Molly Attrell, County Press Letters, the 18th of February, for taking the time to respond to my letter. But as I mentioned, this is not about Boris. This is more about the tsunami of criticism levelled at him by people inside and outside Parliament. I agree that Boris will not and cannot change, but the simple truth is that not one of us can change either unless God intervenes and comes knocking on our door. As the Bible reminds us in Romans 3:10, as it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. More importantly, what standard of measurement are we using to make these judgments? If there is no consensus, then we are in the position of exercising our own opinions that have no basis in morality and uprightness, just public opinion which changes with the weather. The Bible is the only solid base for sound morality and judgment, because God never changes and neither does his word. So what does that say about our elected representatives? More importantly, what does that say about us as a nation? To direct all this vitriol towards one person is quite wrong when we are all guilty of infringements of the law and COVID guidelines to one extent or another. Who among us, or our elected representatives, can pop their heads above the parapet and proclaim their innocence? I'll hazard a guess and say no one. So if we are bent on criticising our elected representatives, I rather suspect that the impact on Parliament would be such that if the criteria was that they had to be honest, upright citizens, the numbers would be severely reduced in the process across all parties.
And now a letter from Richard Whiting of Brading, headlined Info Needed on RBL Plaque. In the autumn of 2019, I came into possession of a Brading British Legion plaque dated 1987 to 1995. I believe this is now a disbanded association, and I hope to have it put on public display in Brading. If this is not possible, perhaps it could be displayed in a British Legion museum or club locally or nationally. I would like to gain as much information of the names and their associated families inserted on the plaque. Because of the dates, it is a commemorative plaque of their deaths and not an historical war memorial. Of course, their involvement in war years is an unknown, but could also be of interest. Their names and dates are as follows: General George W. Harris, 1987, Stanley G. Temple, 1988, Joan Cook, 1988, the Reverend Eric Hayden, 1988, Ernest Ireland, 1989, John Reed, 1990, Arthur Pink, 1990, Tom Coster, 1992, Ken Grimwade, 1992, Fred Weller, 1992, Kitty Longhurst, again 1992, Mary Cox, 1993, John Hunter, 1993, and Reg Crane, 1995. I do have some information on the above, but more knowledge added could make a local history archive. I can be contacted at 3 Hawkins Close, Brading, PO 360HZ, and the phone number there is 01983 407 667.
A letter from George Lee, Cowes. Why won't police and council use powers to tidy up Cowes site? Calls for a tidy up of a cow's central site seems to have fallen on deaf ears, and residents are asking the authority to buy the private land. County Press, 18th of February. But why is that necessary? According to the Environment Protection Act, local authorities have the power to take legal action if litter on private land is causing a nuisance to the public or is prejudicial to public health. Further, local authorities and police have the power to issue a community protection notice to a property owner under the Anti-Social Crime and Policing Act if their conduct is unreasonable and having a detrimental effect of a persistent or continuing nature on the quality of life of those in the locality. Clearly, a pile of abandoned builders' rubble impacts on those residents who object to living next to a rubbish dump.
And now a letter from Stanley Brinker of Bembridge, headlined, "Why does our national media seem bent on destroying the royal family?" One could be forgiven for thinking our precious societal order is being eroded by the media, a media that seems hell-bent on destroying our royal family. No sooner does Prince Andrew thoughtfully settle a civil lawsuit with a woman he doesn't recall ever meeting, in order events do not drag on and distract from Her Majesty's Jubilee Year celebrations, the media launches into an attack on Prince Charles, reporting that the Metropolitan Police have started a cash for honours probe into a Saudi billionaire donor receiving a knighthood and UK citizenship. Does anyone really care if a knighthood and citizenship may have been given in exchange for a suitable charitable donation? As for Prince Andrew, he by all accounts has had to sell his Swiss Alpine chalet to raise funds, along with a donation from the Queen to generously donate to Virginia Giuffre's charity. Why do we pretend to be so self-righteous? I mean, isn't all the hand-wringing over Russia and the Ukraine a little hypocritical, when it is widely acknowledged that the City of London is the money laundering capital of the world, not least for Russian oligarchs? And as for Boris Johnson, if he receives a fixed penalty fine for a breach of COVID regulations in his Downing Street residence/office, who truly believes he won't simply claim it as a cost on expenses? So let's not be hypocrites. It is surely only right that any legal expenses, lawyers' fees, etc. incurred by Prince Andrew are met in full by the public purse. Just accept this is how things work in our society and move on.
Lastly, a letter from Councillor Jenny Hicks of Sandown. Roadworks hitting our town. Sandown residents, businesses and tourists deserve better. Our high street has endured 6 weeks disruption with white fibre installations so far. Works are seemingly endless, and now many traders have resorted to shutting as access is limited and noise and dust continues. This is reflecting on Sandown's businesses. There is no new extra work crews in sight to speed up the installation.
And now we move on to the White Memories article, and the first of these is headlined "The Island's Biggest Air Disasters," plural, of the 1950s and 60s remembered. And this is an article by David Wight. During the 1960s, air travel was on the change. Most flying boat operators were changing to the more convenient method of travel from water to land-based airports. One of the last operators was Aquila Airways, which used the huge short-solent flying boats. And it was one night in 1957 when the city of Sydney developed engine trouble soon after leaving Southampton Water and crashed into the face of a chalk pit in Shalcombe near Brook. Being fully loaded with fuel, the plane swiftly became a fireball. A total of 45 people were killed, but there were some survivors due to the gallant efforts of rescuers, a group of soldiers on night exercises in the area. Of the plane, the only part left in any recognisable form was the tail. Soon after this tragic incident, Aquila ceased operating. The second tragedy happened in 1962, when a Douglas C-47A hit the side of St Boniface Down in Ventnor, killing 12 of its 18 passengers. It had been on a scheduled flight from Jersey to Portsmouth and burst into flames on hitting the downland. This happened on a Sunday, and on Sundays during that period, small airports left navigation to the pilot. It was heavy fog and the pilot recommended not flying, but Channel Island Airways insisted.
A few pints and a jaunt on some old buses. What could be nicer? An article by Alan Marriott. In its short-lived history, the Isle of Wight Beer and Buses Weekend became something islanders and tourists marked in their diary for October. Now the event has been cancelled after being postponed twice in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID. Organisers say the massive amount of effort, coupled with the loss of a key organiser and lack of volunteers, mean it is unsustainable in the long term. They estimate it brought in £500,000 a year to the island economy, and it was recognised as one of the very few events of its kind in the UK.
And now moving on to the My View column, in which a panel of columnists take it in turn to give their take on life as it is played out on the Isle of Wight. And this week's columnist is a Mr. Malcolm Mime. The headline reads, "Woke World Makes Me Sad." The two stories on the front and back pages of last week's County Press reinforced to me the changing times in which we currently live. The content of neither of the two stories makes for better changing times, although one of the changes I can live with, while the other I really can't. Let me start with the back page story regarding the sad demise of Brading Cricket Club, which, despite my love of cricket, is the change that I can accept. The reason I can accept it is because it is perfectly natural for societies to evolve. It would be quite unnatural for everything to remain the same. Many of us are saddened when things that have been with us for years disappear, but the way in which we humans live our lives changes from generation to generation. In recent times, we've seen familiar high street shops disappear, and as a lover and collector of records, I was distraught when Studio 4 Records in Ryde closed, and then Happy Days in Newport went too. The all-singing, all-dancing HMV arrived on the scene, but despite Newport High Street being blocked with crowds on their opening day, HMV ultimately disappeared too. Even good old Woolies and its bargain bin of records couldn't survive the changes of time. I still feel sad that these shops have gone, but I accept it. I also felt sad when both Zanies and Colonel Bogey's nightclubs were not only closed but demolished. But again, these things I accept as part of the change in times. Although Brading Cricket Club have called it a day, cricket will continue to be played, and there remain some thriving clubs on the island, just fewer of them.
And so to the front page story, the subject matter of which I really cannot abide. That subject is wokeness. The word woke used to mean waking up to social injustices, but in recent times the word has taken on a whole new meaning, best defined as looking purposely to try and find social injustice, even when it isn't there, and then sharing the false injustice with others of a similar ilk, so as to look like a warrior. The latest victim of this quite abhorrent behaviour is the leader of the council, Laura P.C. Wilcox, who has been hounded by rival councillors because she apparently owns a collection of golly dolls. Those playing the woke card declared that allegedly owning such a collection means that Laura must be racist. But if we use the same logic regarding the collection of Nazi memorabilia sold by a well-known auction house last week, That makes the new owner of the collection a Nazi, and probably the profiting auctioneers Nazis too. It's all absolute nonsense. I've got a few old Sex Pistols records in my collection somewhere, so does that make me an anarchist? Councillor P.C. Wilcox is no racist, and by labelling innocent people like her as such results in the world become weakened and meaningless. This in turn allows the real racists to get away with atrocities. I was disappointed to see this county press gave it the front page, and I let editor Alan Marriott know my thoughts. The changing of the times I can handle. Wokeness, I really can't.
Now, a column by the Island's MP Bob Seeley, headlined, "Thanks to all who joined Rhodes Police effort." Last week, our Police and Crime Commissioner Donna Jones announced that the island will once again have dedicated Rhodes policing officers, following a campaign by myself and others. I would like to thank everyone who supported me in bringing back dedicated Rhodes officers to the island, including Coroner Caroline Summery, current and former police officers, town and parish councils, island residents and members of the Isle of Wight Council. Working together, we have made our voices heard. The sad reality is that we have the most dangerous roads outside London in Britain, and 3 times the average number of people die and are seriously injured as a result. Currently, officer time is split between armed response and roads policing, but this announcement means 2 new posts will be created dedicated solely to policing the island's roads. In addition, Hampshire Constabulary will recruit 3 more armed response roads policing officers, taking the joint unit from 9 to 14, making a significant difference to our capacity. And this is just the start. Numbers will be reviewed at a later date. As soon as these officers are in post, I will meet with them to pass on the details of concerns that islanders have shared with me. Thank you to all those who wrote to me. And what else has happened this month? First, the Isle of Wight Council was allocated £1 million in recognition of our unique circumstances. Am I happy with this? Not particularly. It's not enough, and I will be working to get more. But it is the first time money has been awarded explicitly on the basis of being an island, and therefore it sets a precedent. Second, Senior Minister Michael Gove is adopting my suggestion for a national forum for UK islands. This Islands Forum will enable the Isle of Wight, working with other islands, to have a collective voice with government. In addition, the island has also been designated by the government as an education investment area, which means more support to improve education on the island. All these are going to help deliver better education, better training, and better job opportunities and life chances for islanders. And finally, Southern Water this month agreed to repair the main outfall pipes in Seaview, which has been responsible for spilling sewage onto the beach on occasion. Work will take place in April. I wish you a good weekend.
Next, we go to What's On the island. Adele tribute at Medina Theatre. Can't get to Las Vegas to see Adele. Closer to home, there is a concert production of Someone Like You, the Adele songbook, coming to Medina Theatre, starring X Factor finalist Katie Markham. She was selected by Adele herself to appear in the BBC Adele special presented by Graham Norton, but never dreamed she would be both singing live with her idol on stage in London and launching a UK touring show, all within a year. Now in its 5th year, Someone Like You, the Adele songbook, recreates the magic of Adele's music from her 3 hit albums, 19, 21 and 25, and now the new album, 30. The new works include Easy on Me, I Drink Wine, Oh My God and Can I Get It? Prepare for an emotional journey with this live concert performance, celebrating the music of one of our generation's finest singer-songwriters. Katie said, "I'm over the moon about Adele's new album. It's an incredible listen, and I cannot wait to perform her new songs. There is a real beauty to Adele's music. I think that's why it appeals to so many people. She lays raw emotion out for all the world to see. People can relate to her happiness, pain, sorrow, heartache, and healing process." The concert will also feature the smash hits Chasing Pavements, Make You Feel My Love, Set Fire to the Rain, Someone Like You, Rolling in the Deep, Hello, and the multi-million-selling Bond movie single Skyfall. The show is on Saturday, March the 5th.
And coming up at Shanklin Theatre over the coming month, we have on Saturday the 26th of February at 7:30pm, The Night of 1,000 Freddies. On Thursday the 3rd of March at 8pm, we have Simon Brodkin with his Troublemaker show. And on Thursday the 24th of March at 7:30pm, The Furies. On Saturday 5th of March at 8pm, Rich Hall. On Thursday 24th of March at 7:30pm, The Manfreds. On Friday the 25th of March at 7:30pm, Eric and Erm, which stars Ian Ashpatel and Joan T. Stevens. On Saturday 26th of March at 8pm, Omid Jalili. And from Monday 28th of March through to Wednesday 30th of March at 6:30pm, First Act present Orpheus Rocks. The box office there can be contacted on 01983 868 000.
A show to fund island games for athletes by Liam Chorley. A fundraising event is to take place to raise money for the Isle of Wight athletics team. Team manager Nick Grucock says the cash is needed to take his team to the Island Games in Guernsey next year. He is hoping to take as many as 30 individuals to the Games and needs to raise approximately £1,000 per athlete. "We try to lower the cost by half for each athlete," said Nick. "So we're looking to raise around £15,000. We have a real mixture of athletes. Some are adults with jobs, but around 80% are students who struggle to cover the costs. Church's solicitors kindly sponsor our kit, and historically we've done other fundraisers like bag packing, but obviously we can't do that anymore. It's harder this year than ever before to raise the cash, but all of the proceeds from this event will go to the team." The event, scheduled for Friday, March the 4th at Lower Hyde, Shanklin, will feature the Hip Shaker DJs with music from the 1960s. Southampton four-piece The High Watts will also perform. Expect a flavour of The Who, with the drummer using a replica Premier drum kit like that played by Keith Moon. Doors open at 8pm, with entertainment through until 1am.
And now news that one of the UK's most exciting jazz and blues guitarists, Remy Harris, is set to play at Key Arts. Remy has been called an extraordinary musician by Jamie Cullum and has a growing international reputation for blending all his influences into his own individual style of playing. Remy's performance will feature a variety of acoustic and electric guitars, and he'll be joined on stage by long-term collaborator Tom Moore on double and electric bass. The event is at the Anthony Minghella Theatre on Thursday, March the 3rd at 7:30pm. Tickets are available from the box office on 01983 822 490.
The Isle of Wight Cantata Choir will be performing at 7:30pm on Saturday, the 5th of March 2022 at All Saints Church Ryde, PO 33 3AF. They will be performing the Magnificat by Rutter, Songs My Heart Has Taught Me, Chilcot. Tickets are £10 and can be obtained from the website iowcantatachoir.co.uk/concerts or by telephone 07760 852074.
And now we move on to a variety of additional news items from the county press. The first of these being news of an interim chief taking over at Isle of Wight Council. The Isle of Wight Council is set to appoint an interim head of paid service and chief executive ahead of John Metcalfe's departure. Wendy Pereira is being recommended to councillors at a meeting next week. The local authority says this is to ensure a smooth handover from current chief executive John Metcalfe, who is due to leave at the end of March after nearly 25 years with the authority. Miss Pereira has worked for the council for much of her career, including key roles in the planning department. She's currently Assistant Chief Executive and Director of Corporate Strategy. Council leader Councillor Laura P.C. Wilcox said, "It's great to be able to recommend Wendy for appointment. She has a proven track record in local government and brings a wealth of expertise and experience. Wendy has been in her current role since 2018 and has worked closely with John in managing the council over this time. She is well known with staff and stakeholders and will offer some much needed continuity and stability for them as the council transitions into its future leadership arrangements."
Island Ferry Firm in apprentice deal. A new apprenticeship partnership agreement has been reached between two major UK ship repair facilities and Red Funnel. It will result in apprentices from all three companies being offered the chance to train across some of the largest businesses in the maritime sector. AMP Group and Camel Laird operate the UK's largest commercial ship repair facilities. They offer training in marine engineering, fabrication, electrical, project management, health and safety, finance and procurement. Red Funnel's apprenticeship programme enables young people to earn as they learn. Red Funnel's Red Falcon, Red Eagle and Red Osprey have been visiting AMP Group's Falmouth facility for dry dockings and repairs for the past 5 years. In 2019, Camel Laird completed the build of the Red Kestrel.
And staying on the subject of ferries, wooden debris in the wake of Storm Eunice got caught up in the bucket of Red Jet 6 on Sunday morning. The debris in the floor raft led to the temporary suspension of service for the vessel on the Cowes to Southampton route. Red Funnel cancelled the 8:55pm sailing from Cowes. Engineers later assessed the boat, removed the debris, and the timetable was resumed.
Nasty Nick in Black Chair. Tricky questions about the Isle of Wight were tackled by EastEnders actor John Altman on Celebrity Mastermind. He is a big fan of the island and chose it as his specialist subject. The actor played Nasty Nick in the soap over several years and is also known for his stage work, including at Mayflower Theatre in Southampton. The BBC One show aired on Saturday but can be watched on BBC iPlayer.
And news that residents are objecting to a halfway house. Residents of a Shanklin Street are the latest to reject the idea of a halfway house for the homeless. Two Saints, a not-for-profit service for the homeless, in partnership with the Isle of Wight Council, is looking to buy and convert the former Rosemere Bed and Breakfast on Queen's Road, turning it into a property for the homeless. Local residents and businesses, however, have told Two Saints last Wednesday the building in question and the local area was completely inappropriate for a house of multiple occupation, that's an HMO. One neighbour said they had had no communication from Two Saints and felt totally ignored. James McDermott, Two Saints Regional Director, said speaking to local residents had been the next step in the plan, but he said, hand on heart, that the HMO's residents would not cause chaos. Local people said there were already 2 HMOs on the road, and while they wished the people well, it was wrong for the area. Shanklin South Councillor Chris Quirk said he felt comfortable that this HMO would be better than the others nearby, but the number of HMOs in the area was damaging. Other concerns were also raised about residents' potential behaviour and the disturbances it would cause with young families, elderly residents and lots of tourist-based businesses around. The HMO would have 6 beds, be staffed 6 days a week and be a place for residents to stay while they found somewhere more permanent. Mr McDermott said no individual would be placed in the HMO directly from the street, but would go through assessments to ensure they were ready to live independently and would not negatively impact the local community. The Queen's Road property was one of 5 Two Saints are currently interested in on the island, and Mr McDermott said they had a contract with the council to provide 25 accommodation units. Councillor Michael Beston, Shanklin Central representative, told the meeting if he was uncomfortable with the proposal in any way, he would be screaming and shouting, but they needed to work with Two Saints. Recent attempts by Two Saints to open HMOs across the island were unsuccessful, after community concerns saw a seller pull out in Sandown and a funding issue and lack of council support for a property in Newport.
Calling all knitters. Hampshire and Isle of Wight police officers are appealing to the knitting community to help make more teddy bears for children involved in domestic abuse. Previously, police were inundated with offers of help from people to knit the police officer teddy bears. They've been so popular they are now running low. Finished bears can be handed in at your local police station. Knitters and crocheters can find a pattern at hampshirepolice.uk under the news section.
And now news that cancer sufferers get an Isle of Wight experience. A Newport woman who suffered from mouth cancer came across a charity that provides free gifts, experiences and essentials to families affected by cancer poverty. Maxine Leaper found the charity, Something to Look Forward To, in an online advert. Through the charity, she received a free return car ferry code. The charity provides gifts, experiences and essentials donated by individuals and businesses to families who are struggling financially and emotionally. Maxine is calling for islanders and local businesses to get involved in the initiative. She added, "The island is usually really good at getting together in things like this. I wonder whether more island businesses, like restaurants, might get involved. The island has so many lovely places that could offer their services to locals and sufferers from further afield. That would give them, as the charity's name suggests, something to look forward to." The return ticket Maxine received was through Wightlink. Something to Look Forward To and their partnership with Sail for Cancer. Francesca Avery, Managing Director, said, "The free ferry crossings for people affected by cancer have enabled those living on the island to visit the mainland and those from the mainland to visit the island. This has empowered couples and families to create special memories together, visit loved ones and take a break from the demanding world of cancer. It even enabled one person to move house." A beneficiary said, "We thoroughly enjoyed our day out on the island. My husband and our 2 dogs visited a farm, had a tour of the island and finished with fish and chips on our laps." Stuart James, who's Whitelink's Marketing and Innovation Director, said, "Given our mutual connection with the sea, Wightlink has enjoyed a long association with Sail for Cancer that goes back nearly 20 years. In the past, we have taken cancer patients and their families across to the island to join yachts and other craft so they could enjoy days out on the water. With our latest partnership, we're delighted to provide travel so those affected by cancer can enjoy the magic of the Isle of Wight, as well as islanders looking for much-needed respite days out on the mainland. Find out more at www.somethingtolookforwardto.org.uk.
Finding out about our furry friends. Residents at Orchard House in Newport celebrated Squirrel Appreciation Day by inviting Tracy Dove from Zoologica to give a talk about the creatures on behalf of the Isle of Wight Squirrel Trust. Tracy showed the residents a film that highlighted a year in the life of a red squirrel. Residents learned many facts, and some that surprised them, such as 1 out of 6 squirrels make it past a year old, and squirrels need extra food put out for them during spring when their food sources are scarce. Debbie Webb, head of Lifestyle, said, "We have at least 2 squirrels who visit our grounds and delight residents with their antics on almost a daily basis. We learned today about the Squirrel Project and are keen to report our sightings to them, and residents decided that we should put out more bowls of water and hazelnuts to help keep them healthy." Orchard House resident Pauline said, "I was very interested in this talk. I discovered that female squirrels only come into season twice a year for 1 day at a time, which was very surprising. Also that they eat the bones of dead animals for the calcium."
And now news that the council leader and the MP have united over funding. The Islands MP has joined critics calling for more money from government to recognise the Isle of Wight's unique circumstances after a payout was awarded. As part of a £54.1 billion levelling up agenda, the government announced £1 million would be given to the Isle of Wight Council in recognition of the added extra costs the island faces due to being separated by the Solent. It had been hoped, however, based on a report by the University of Portsmouth in 2015, that a sum of over £6 million would put the island on a level playing field with the mainland. The £1 million was slammed as highly unsatisfactory and profoundly disappointing by the ruling Alliance administration on the Isle of Wight Council. Speaking at a meeting last week, Council leader Councillor Laura Peacey-Wilcox said the island's unique position failed to be recognised and the £1 million offered no meaningful national support for pressures felt locally. She said while the administration was going to keep making the case for an island deal, they were not going to sit back and wait for another broken promise. Now, Isle of Wight MP Bob Seeley has said, while an important principle has been set, recognising the island's unique circumstances, the interim payment was not enough. Responding to Councillor Peacey-Wilcox's comments, he said, "Championing the island's needs will always be my priority, so I share the Council's frustrations. With this principle established, the case is now even stronger for a more substantial package, especially given that all the available evidence supports our case." Work continues, Mr Seeley said, and he was grateful for the ongoing support of council officers in making the case to government. He said it was important they worked together to keep the pressure on Whitehall, ministers and Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Mr Seeley also said he was disappointed the government's fair funding review was delayed, as it was the key to securing a longer-term sustainable settlement. The island deal, he said, was not a one-off bag of money.
COVID deaths. 3 more people have died on the Isle of Wight with COVID. Data shows a death in a care home in the week up to February the 11th. There have also been 2 further deaths at St Mary's Hospital on February the 20th and February the 21st. In total, the island has had 389 deaths of people with COVID. The Isle of Wight rolling rate is currently 629, higher than the UK rate of 460.6. St Mary's Hospital will not be relaxing its current COVID restrictions.
And now the MP in the news again, calling for more overseas dentists. MP Bob Seeley has told Parliament it is almost impossible to find an NHS dentist on the Isle of Wight, and has called for more to be done to encourage overseas experts to base themselves in the UK. He took part in a debate just days after the government announced a one-off additional £50 million for NHS dental services. Mr Seeley has warned the consequences were not only sore teeth, but dangerous diseases going undiagnosed, including oral cancers. He called for the government to grant the General Dental Council greater discretion over the recognition of overseas dental qualifications. Mr Seeley wants an adaptation course to help experienced, qualified overseas dentists work here, and recognition of qualifications across European Economic Area countries, along with those overseas, potentially as part of future trade agreements. He wants measures to recruit 1,000 new dentists within 12 months. He said that could be targeted at the Indian subcontinent, which, according to dental experts I speak to, produces very high standards of dentists.
Police probe into hate incident against leader. Hampshire Police have confirmed they are investigating a possible hate incident against Isle of Wight Council leader, Councillor Laura P.C. Wilcox. Last week, the county press reported Councillor P.C. Wilcox denied having golly figures in her home, despite a Facebook post from herself from November appearing to show a glass display cabinet in her kitchen full of golly figures. Councillor P.C. Wilcox denied she had any such figures in her home at this time. Then on Monday, Isle of Wight Council Chairman Councillor Jeff Brodie, who said he was tired of being accused of things over the matter, published an exchange of emails from November which appeared to show him drafting a resignation letter for the leader, including the claim she had been given the figures by a relative. She replies thanking him for the draft. Councillor P.C. Wilcox told the county press it was now a police matter. Hampshire Constabulary yesterday, Thursday, issued a statement saying, "We received a report of a hate incident on Tuesday evening from a woman aged in her 50s from Cowes. The report relates to the sharing of an image online and subsequent harassment to the victim from members of the public. An investigator is reviewing the circumstances to establish whether any offences have been committed." The issue over the gollies erupted at last night's full Isle of Wight Council budget meeting, with Councillor Brodie clearing the public gallery and attempting to remove the press from the chamber during the adjournment. Conservative group leader Councillor Joe Robertson said, "A question to the leader. At the beginning, in your leader's report, you went into some detail about the things you'd been doing for people in poverty, for women, for children, for vulnerable people in your ward, those in the social care system. Despite what's been in the press in the last 4 or 5 days, you didn't take that opportunity to say a single thing about ethnic diversity and racial equality and the importance of people from ethnic minority backgrounds for you, this island, the council and the country. We've all seen the image you posted on Facebook in November last year. In the foreground, your dogs are asleep, and in the background is a display of racially offensive dolls. Yesterday, a friend of yours put on Facebook that you'd had a collection of golly dolls for as long as she could remember. As leader of the council, please can you explain whether those dolls were displayed in your home in November? You shared the image in public. Silence is not an acceptable answer. In response, Councillor Laura P.C. Wilcox said, "I had no prior notice of this question and will not answer because it is not a matter about budget, policy, nor something for which this council has responsibility." Responding, Chair of the Council, Councillor Jeff Brodie said, "I would disagree. The policy of this council regarding equality and diversity is fundamental to what we do as a council. I think it is incumbent on you to provide a response." There were angry reactions from members of the public and shouting from both sides of the chamber. The meeting was adjourned after the public gallery was cleared. When it resumed, Conservative Councillor Susie Ellis asked, "Leader, do you recognise that golly dolls seen in an image shared on your Facebook page last year are offensive, and will you apologise for causing offence?" Councillor P.C. Wilcox said she would respond to the questions in writing. Councillor Brodie called the leader's response tedious and disturbing and said, "If equality and diversity is not crucial to the policies of this council, I would be seriously concerned in the 21st century." Councillor Warren Drew called the earlier shouting from the public gallery scandalous and said it was not about Councillor P.C. Wilcox as an individual, but about democracy. At the start of the meeting, Councillor P.C. Wilcox spoke about carrying a personal alarm for her safety.
Briefly, the due sports celebrity TV chef Ainsley Harriott and journalist Grace Dent on the island. The pair were spotted by County Press reader Christopher Jackson outside the Smoking Lobster in Ventnor on Tuesday. Christopher told the County Press they were filming at locations across the island for a new BBC series. Grace tweeted about the island last month, looking for suggestions for things to do, eat and see, and expressing her excitement about travelling on the ferry. Ainsley Harriott is well known for being the presenter of Ready Steady Cook. Grace Dent is a journalist, food critic and author, as well as a regular critic on MasterChef UK. And that's all we have time for this week, so it's goodbye from me, Stephen.
And goodbye from me, Francis. Software and technology within the workplace. In touch. Technological change within the workplace is often rapid, with frequent system updates. More companies are adopting software that operates via a web page browser, or what is known as the cloud. Listener Matt Johnson, a data protection and privacy lawyer, contacted In Touch to say he feels the move to cloud-based software in the workplace is causing serious access problems for people who are blind or partially sighted. He puts his concerns to Microsoft's Director of Accessibility Evangelism, Hector Minto, asking what the company is doing to help. Peter also talks to Calvin Duncan, technical consultant at accessibility consultancy firm Blazy, and to the RNIB's Robin Spinks about whether the UK's leading visual impairment charity should be lobbying harder for law changes to improve access to technology. Presenter Peter Wight, producer Beth Hemmings, production coordinator Liz Paul.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. One of the most often quoted statistics on this programme is that just over 1 in 4 visually impaired people of working age is actually in a job. The precision of this figure is sometimes disputed, though it's still regularly cited by the RNIB amongst others, and what is surely beyond question is that there are many people with much to offer in the workplace who are excluded and living on benefits. For the last 30 years or more, technology has been hailed as the long-term solution to this problem. Such equipment is frequently featured on this programme, and only a few months ago we ran a short item pointing out some of the assistive tech which could help you get into and then perform a range of jobs. It was intended to be encouraging, but for one listener at least, it only scratched the surface of the topic, it was over-optimistic, and he maintained that far from technology being a panacea for getting into work, it was now often a stumbling block. It's a point which is quite well illustrated by Rhianna Parkinson's recent experience.
In 2020, I applied for a job with the police. I was accepted in October. They'd said, you can start as soon as we've made the reasonable adjustments. And then applied for access to work pretty much straight away. I got my grant and I was told I could have whatever technology I needed. But it was proving very difficult because I wasn't invited to any of the meetings about my needs. And they started offering me things that were absolutely no use to me. Eventually they came out and said, there's absolutely no way we can make our computer systems compatible with JAWS. And then I suggested getting a scripting expert in because that's what Access to Work suggested that I do. But the police said that's not possible either because letting anyone edit our databases is a security issue. I use computers every day. I don't really have a problem using technology. It's just that they couldn't understand what I needed and how it would work. And then they eventually just said, we're going to withdraw the job offer.
Now, Lancashire Constabulary said afterwards that it's committed to fulfilling all its obligations under the Equality Act, but in this case, after detailed exploration, it wasn't possible to make an offer of employment. I mean, what's your reaction to that?
On the one level, I understand where they were coming from, but I think right at the beginning, there was quite a high level of ignorance of not even understanding what a screen reader was, despite me sending them all the details and putting them in contact with Access to Work. But as well as that, if they absolutely knew they couldn't do it, why keep me waiting a year? Like, I would have been upset if they'd withdrawn the offer earlier, but I could have spent that time applying for more jobs and I could be in work now.
Rhianna Parkinson, who is taking her case to a tribunal in June, and we'll obviously keep an eye on how that goes. Our original emailer was Matt Johnson, and he felt we should be delving into the issues that this case raises and many others, and that's just what we're doing this evening. Matt Johnson joins us. You're a lawyer and you're making a big claim that technology is now often more of a stumbling block than the liberator that it was claimed to be. What's the essence of your argument?
I am a data privacy and IT lawyer. I work with modern technology and data on a regular basis. And historically, the computer on your desk was the end point for all of the technologies you use, in that you would have all of your programs just installed there and you would be able to use a screen access package that was able to tap into all of those and provide, information that you needed to do your job in an accessible way. My view, however, and it's compounded by the views of a lot of others in similar positions who I've spoken to in the last couple of months, is that since we're now moving into a cloud-based environment, so meaning you don't necessarily have all of the programs on your computer, they are on a server somewhere else that you would access, typically through a web browser. What that means from an access perspective is that the screen reader can't tap into the underlying program that's being used because it's on a server somewhere else. All that we have access to is what the browser gives us back. And what the browser gives us back is very much controlled very tightly by the manufacturer of those technologies. What that essentially means is your screen reader doesn't have the information it needs to tell you what is on the screen correctly or quickly. That is one of the effects of that. You simply just don't have as much information at your fingertips as you did before. The second effect of that, which is equally important, is that we are entirely dependent on these third-party, program designers And if they change something overnight, we could walk into, a job at 9 o'clock on Monday morning and be entirely unable to use something that worked perfectly at 5 p.m. on Friday afternoon. At the end of the day, this affects everyone simply because technology is used by everyone.
Right. Let me bring in Hector Minto, who is the Director of Accessibility Evangelism with Microsoft. Hector, what do you say to the argument that, with the current speed of developments, that technology can now be less of an asset and more of a stumbling block to visually impaired workers?
It's a super question. I mean, really what you're talking about is the increased democratization of who can create technology. That's the challenge we're up against. When you start moving it to concepts like business software and what we would call in the enterprise world, biz apps, what you're starting to see there is that more and more people within a workplace being able to create that technology. So in years gone by, there might have been a kind of a technology refresh every few years and a core team responsible for it. What we're now seeing is that many, many more people within any kind of business are able to create in-work technology, a SharePoint, an intranet, a biz app itself. And as that happens, the lack of awareness, which Matt's brought up brilliantly, the lack of awareness of how somebody who's blind uses technology becomes more of a challenge.
So the more people there are doing it, the more people there may be who are doing it without knowing what visually impaired people's needs are.
Absolutely right. I mean, in years up till now, even people who are taught computer science and coding nowadays are still not routinely taught about accessibility. The more that we actually turn it to a wider audience of what we would call low-code, no-coders, so people who don't necessarily even have coding skills with the ability to now create technology, that's the mainstream trend. That puts an even greater onus on the business itself to put in build standards around accessibility. So what we're now doing is we've got a call to action to all Microsoft partners around the world to sign up to accessibility. That hasn't always been the way. So we need greater knowledge and greater awareness around the technology people selling and delivering that technology around the world to do more on accessibility because the problem is proliferating.
Matt, you raised this whole issue. Is there anything you'd like to put directly to Hector?
That leads me on to a point regarding the democratization, if you like, of coding. I think where we are with that is obviously that third parties and app developers can create within the Microsoft ecosystem. Take, for example, Dynamics or some plugins to like Office 365, right? So with that said, how is it that you can have a third-party app developer that creates an app within Microsoft's ecosystem that is fundamentally inaccessible? To me, that sort of sounds like saying, well, Microsoft has built a car, and if a third-party app developer wants to change the tires or to add a bigger stereo, then some of your demographic can't use the car anymore. At the end of the day, it is within Microsoft's control, a company that has had tens of billions in revenue. It is exactly within their control to mandate what their third parties can and can't do and how those third parties do it.
I must let Hector answer that.
We 100% agree with you that we want to get to a point where it's harder to create inaccessible experiences. But you are talking about millions of developers out there creating content. We still live in a world where 90% of the world's top million homepages are still fundamentally or still have inaccessibility issues. We've got to work harder to educate developers all around the world to deliver content that is accessible. Now, one thing we are doing, if it helps, we now share our testing tools for devs and for accessibility completely free of charge. So we have Accessibility Insights, which is our open source testing software. Essentially, people are modifying technology on a daily basis. We've got to work harder and harder to make sure that people are educated into what it is to be accessible.
Right. Kelvin Duncan is an accessibility consultant with Blazy, who've been in the business of accessibility for over 30 years. Kelvin, you advise tech companies, you also advise visually impaired people, and you make a distinction between equipment being accessible and being usable. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, something is technically accessible if the user can understand or perceive it. So if you took an example of perhaps some information on a website, if you can retrieve that information and if you could actually have the screen reader read that back to you, then it's technically accessible. But if it takes you a very long time to actually retrieve the information in the first place, then it's not technically usable.
Right. And we're talking here about, the number of taps you might have to make to get to something, whereas you should be able to do it in one. You might have to take several, maybe 20.
Yeah, correct. Like, for example, if you're sitting at home doing a Tesco shop, for example, and it takes you a really long time to buy a bunch of bananas, then even though it's technically accessible, you can do it. But if you're in a workplace environment, maybe working on a 999 emergency call, for example, then you can't afford to take that length of time. You have to be quicker than or equal to the speed of your colleague.
I just want to stay with you for a minute, Kelvin, to take a specific example. A blind person goes for a job that they feel that they have the skills to do, provided the company's systems allow them to do it. A bit like Rihanna, really. Now, you also know that the government's Access to Work scheme offers you financial help with the training and adaptations that you might need. But, Kelvin, your concern is that under current Access to Work eligibility rules, you need to have the job before you get the help.
Yes, we have a lot of people coming to us. They're offered a job and they're in exactly the same boat as Rihanna, whereby they are either told by the employer themselves, who quite often are not actually qualified to make that statement, that their systems cannot support something, or otherwise they are told by, Access to Work that it can't be done. And in this case, we're talking about somebody who actually had the funding in place, who had done all the legwork, who gave them as much information as possible and still didn't manage to get that job. And I argue, had that constabulary come to a company like Blazy and approached somebody with the skill and the know-how, and also, I take on board, not being able to look at systems and so on, but that's not true, because we look at some of the most secure systems in the country.
Right. In this case, the Department of Work and Pension, Rihanna felt had been as helpful as they could be. We did invite the DWP to put up a minister to join this discussion, and we were told there was no one available. They did draw our attention to adjustment passports that they're trialling at the moment at 3 universities. These passports, they say, will provide disabled students, because they're testing them with students at the moment, with an up-to-date record of the adjustments they're currently using and any future in-work support needs that they may have. And they say that will also support potential employers by documenting the in-work support that someone requires. How much would that answer the point that you're making, Matt?
With respect to the access to work passports to move between jobs, I think that's perfectly adequate in certain situations, namely people that need to bring hardware with them or something very specific like that. But having recently changed jobs and found a new employer, what I can tell you is that whilst my job is entirely the same, the systems which underpin it are different. And so the idea that you can just bring an accessibility adjustment from one job to another fundamentally does not take into account the fact that, you may be doing the same job, but the systems that allow you to do it are configured in different ways and need to be accessed in different ways.
So the question we have is, we've had this very well explained by 3 people, but what do we do? Matt, first of all, you said in your email you don't think enough is being done to get the right kind of legislative change. We've got an Equality Act. What needs to happen?
The only way forward, which would at least begin to level the playing field, is to advocate for an accessibility framework that is legally required. The only way that we are going to be able to really get the attention of larger companies to take this stuff as seriously as it needs to be taken is for government to step in and essentially legislate for a framework around accessibility. OK, this is where I want to bring in the Royal National Institute for Blind People. Robin Spinks has been listening to this. First of all, do you agree, Robin, having listened to all that?
I think it's clear, Peter, that the workplace is becoming a much more connected experience. Interfaces are changing rapidly. Updates are often weekly. That's a very different world from the one that we inhabited 10 years ago. So absolutely. And we're very keen for blind and partially sighted people to be part of the dialogue all the way along. So, for example, use the accessibility email address for each of those companies that you're using products of. Tell them when things don't work. Tell us when things don't work. We're constantly working with those big tech companies and with a lot of smaller companies to try and hammer home the message about accessibility, but also to make sure that it becomes something that's a behaviour. It's not just something that's done to satisfy a tick box. This is about changing culture and attitude.
Changing culture or changing the law? Because what Matt is saying is that this stuff needs legislation. You know, you have been lobbying for things like more accessible websites and all that kind of thing, but this is more fundamental, isn't it?
Absolutely. Let's see a legislative framework that actually delivers a more accessible digital environment for everyone.
But is this on your agenda? That's the question, you know, for legislation. Is this something that you're pushing for?
We would absolutely love to see legislation come about. In November, we launched our Visibly Better Employer Standard, and that's really asking employers to shine a light on their own practice and to make a really robust commitment to ensuring that their digital assets and their working environment is accessible to blind and partially sighted people.
Robin, I'm just sort of hearing the way that the RNIB seems to be looking at this problem. And you talk on the one side about liaising directly with the big companies that create these applications. You talk on the other side about changing the minds of employers around disability. All of those are, of course, laudable things. But fundamentally here, why isn't the RNIB willing to step up and say, we want a better legislative framework, we want to help make one?
I think it's upon all of us to move this forward, to share examples of good and bad practice, but also to hold people to account. If systems are not accessible, then frankly, we need to use that as the basis for a complaint and use the legislation that we have, but also campaign for stronger legislation to make sure that people are not experiencing barriers in the workplace. It's perfectly possible to use technology to overcome them.
Right, we're going to have to finish in a moment. I want to quickly go back to Hector Minto of Microsoft. Would legislation be any help to you, or is this really the responsibility of companies like yours to develop the technology further so that it allows for minorities like us?
So currently we have technical accessibility standards that are demanded globally. There's EN 301549 is a procurement standard required for all public sector organisations across Europe when they're purchasing and building technology. And the number of requests we get for our conformance statements on accessibility is pitifully low. So we have so much more work to do than just put the law and the standards in. We've got to educate procurement officers, mainstream business application builders. We typically in the accessibility space are not having a conversation at the level it needs to be within an organization. And that's the bit that Microsoft really want to play here. You know, when we raise these issues with CIOs and talk to them about their disability employee groups and link the two together, we get a much better conversation about what's required. Of course, having a legal standing and backdrop to all of that is critically important. I would 100% support that. But we've also got to make sure that we're having conversations at the right level within a business to get decisions made and to make progress on this.
Well, now it's over to you, the listener. What have your experiences been and what would you like to see done? Do tell us. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk. Leave your voice messages on 0161 836 1338. Meanwhile, my very warm thanks to Hector Minto from Microsoft, Robin Spinks from the RNIB, Kelvin Duncan from Blazy, and especially Matt Johnson for raising this whole issue with us. From me, Peter Wight, producer Beth Hemmings, and studio managers Sue Stone Street and Phil Booth, goodbye.
And now this week's Scaffolding and Skips news. That's the week from the 28th of February. Starting with the Ryde area. At Warren Boats, Blewett Avenue in Seaview. And there are skips at Buccaneers, Ferry Road, Seaview, and 4 Swanmore Road, Ryde.
In the freshwater area, the Double Dragon, 7 Tennyson Road.
And in the Newport area, scaffolding at Guildhall on High Street, the Old Mill on St Cross Lane, Newport Minster in St Thomas's Square, and at Phones for You at 50 High Street, also at 54 High Street, Carisbrooke.
In the Cowes area, Jersey Cottage, Market Hill, Sunhill, and the Old NatWest Bank, 104 High Street.
And in the East Cowes area, scaffolding at Co-op on York Road.
In the Shanklin area, 6 A, Landguard Road, and Boots, 1 Regent Street.